Welcome back to the Neutral Zone. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Alabama Crimson Tide as we continue along with our 2025 preview series. This is the second season and the second chapter of the Kalen DeBoer saga in Tuscaloosa, with one of the most dynamic players in Ryan Williams coming back to be the face of the offense. How does this offense look without Jalen Milroe? We're going to answer all those questions in the video. If you guys are new to the channel, make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe to join the nation. Let's get right into the video.
All right, the first year of Kalen DeBoer after the Hall of Famer Nick Saban probably didn't meet Alabama standards. Four losses for an Alabama team is never going to be acceptable. But when you change regimes, you have to expect that there's going to be some growing pains. I think this year Alabama kind of jumps out of that. I think obviously Jalen Milroe's gone. This is the era now of Ty Simpson, but I think they have a strong receiving core. They have some pretty good backs. We really need one to break out. But this has the potential to be a very good team. And for the first time in a long time, I think Alabama's being a little bit slept on. I don't think they're getting the respect that they would have gotten under the Nick Saban regime. And that may really play to their favor. Stephen, what's your thoughts on this Alabama team?
I think it's going to be different. Obviously, like you said, they're a little slept on. I know Alabama fans are going to watch this and they're going to say, we're not slept on. We're going to be ranked in the top five. But I mean, as far as history shows, Alabama has always been that kind of 1A, 1B team for really the
Right.
last 15 seasons. And I don't think they're at that point anymore. Alabama's always going to have the notoriety when it comes to brand name, when it comes to recruits, and just the overall, I guess you'd say, vibe and aura of the program. It's going to be hard to beat Alabama, regardless who the coach is, regardless who's playing quarterback. It's going to be hard to beat Alabama. And I think this team is going to be really good. I think the defense is going to carry this team for the most part. Obviously, you have Ryan Williams, who's arguably a top 5 player in college football, and he just turned 18 years old. So he has a bright future ahead of him. Obviously, you have Jalen Milroe leaving, and Ty Simpson's going to be the successor of him. But you also have Keelan Russell, who I don't think is going to get the nod, but you brought in 3 5-star recruits, and he's one of them, one of the better,
Yeah.
quarterback recruits that Alabama has brought in since the Tua signing. If I'm not mistaken, he might be. I mean, Julian Sand he supposedly was about to go and then transferred to Ohio State, so he would have been
Correct.
a little bit higher ranked. But you bring in a really good recruiting class, and you bring back a stacked offensive line. I think when you have a stacked offensive line at Alabama, it's going to be a recipe for success, regardless of who's running the ball. You can do running back by committee, and regardless of who's throwing the ball. So I think this team is going to be really good. They have a pretty tough schedule, which we'll get into here in a little bit. But I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about their losses. They had a lot of people drafted. Justice Haynes transfers to Michigan. Malachi Moore was one of the most veteran safeties in college football last year. Jahad Campbell obviously was battling injuries, but one of the better linebackers. And then you had Jalen Milroe, who is probably the most explosive quarterback since the 2016-17 Lamar Jackson season. And then you have Tyler Booker, who was one of the better offensive linemen that Alabama's had in a long time, too. They didn't have any big holes in the transfer portal. Isaiah Horton coming over from Miami. And then you bring over offensive line from A&M and 2 other kind of lower caliber players. And people will probably, say something about me saying that. But it's just not – it's not the type of transfer portal haul that we've been accustomed to seeing from a big-time program. Typically, with the Georgias, you get a Zachariah Branch. With even with Colorado, you brought in Caden Salter, who was a top transfer portal addition. So I just don't think, as far as who was in the portal wide receiver wise, I mean, you had Casey Concepcion in the portal, you had Zachariah Branch in the portal, you had numerous wide receivers that were in the portal, and Isaiah Horton was the kind of guy that you went after and got. Which, I mean, no knock to him, but I think Alabama is a big enough name where you could have probably brought in somebody a little bit better than Isaiah Horton is, and I think that's fair to say. But like you said, I mean, you got Ryan Williams coming back, so I think their offense is going to be fine, and I think the defense is going to carry them for the most part this season.
Now, let me say this. I think this team more fits the style of what their head coach wants. I think DeBoer is because Jalen Milroe is a dual threat guy. But if you remember DeBoer at Washington with Michael Penix was not necessarily a dual threat quarterback. He was a thrower. And not to say Jalen Milroe wasn't, but again, I think the knock on Jalen Milroe was his ability to read defenses and throw. I think Ty Simpson fits more of what Kalen DeBoer wants at the quarterback position than maybe Jalen Milroe did. And I think you have some talent at the wide receiver position. Like you mentioned, Ryan Williams. My only concern with Ryan Williams is it seemed as the season went on, obviously we know he had the big, massive Georgia game, but as the season went on, the numbers seemed to slip a little bit. He didn't eclipse 1,000 yards. Not to say, again, freshman year at 17, not to say that he doesn't, but I think we all got to look out and ask ourselves: do maybe defenses have the recipe on Ryan Williams? I like Horton, especially as a third wide receiver. I don't necessarily, and again, you are absolutely right. Some bigger names came over, but as a third wide receiver behind Bernard, who's also a very good wide receiver, I think that's a good pickup. I think Dewberry's going to be a good pickup, especially as you mentioned in your key losses. They lost Tyler Booker. I think that helps solidify that offensive line. To me, this all is Ty Simpson. Is Ty Simpson the Kalen DeBoer type quarterback who can really help this offense explode?
Yeah, so let's get right into the predictions for our record. I have this team going 11-1. I feel like this schedule was pretty cookie cutter for me. I think the at Georgia game. We'll talk about Georgia tomorrow when we drop their video, but I think Georgia's gonna be a really good team. But outside of that, I have Alabama winning every game. I think the LSU game will be tough. We'll find out what LSU's about, in week 1 against Clemson. But with that game being in Bryant-Denny, I favor Alabama in that game. I think by that point, you're going into game 9 or game 8. I think by that point, the defense is clicking. I think Ty Simpson has kind of got a feel for the offense and what DeBoer wants to run. I think at that point, you have Jam Miller, Richard Young at the running back position, kind of running back by committee. And then I think, like you said, Jeremy Bernard, Ryan Williams, and Isaiah Horton will kind of come into their own in the wide receiver group. You also have Jalen Mbakwe, who played corner last year, and he transitioned to a wide receiver. I think he's the fastest player on this team. So I think he could be a gadget guy for him. But overall, I think this schedule is pretty cookie cutter for me. Not having to play Texas, I think is going to help them a lot. And I think the winner of the Alabama-Georgia game is going to be very vital and key in who goes to Atlanta to play against Texas in the SEC title game. But I think, I like Georgia in that matchup in Athens. I just think that's going to be a rocking environment. And I also think in that game, the Georgia defense is going to be a little bit too much for Ty Simpson early. I think this is still very early on. I know I'm higher on Florida State this season, but I just don't think Florida State has the talent to match up with Alabama early in the year. They have a lot of transfer portal additions. I think Alabama is a little bit more solidified on the defensive side of the ball to kind of deal with all the transfer portal additions that Mike Norvell has. So I favor them in that game. So I just think after playing, Florida State and beating them, I have them winning that game kind of big. And I think they're going to blow UL Monroe out. I think they're going to blow Wisconsin out. I think they're kind of going to be feeling themselves a bit too much. I think Georgia is going to come into that game kind of with business at hand. I think Kirby Smart has his own issues to kind of go over without Carson Beck this year, which we'll talk about tomorrow, like I said. But that's the only hiccup I have in this schedule is the Georgia loss. And I think if you lose to Georgia and you don't make the SEC title game, you are a top 4 seed. And I think you get a first round bye, which is kind of what you want. I don't think you really want to play for the SEC title game if you're right around that 4 to 5 spot heading into conference championship week. So what I want to know kind of what made you choose your prediction and what is your floor games? I want to know if we have the same floor games.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. Much like you, that Georgia game, I think we know more about Georgia right now than we know about Alabama. And we know what Georgia's going to be. Georgia's going to be a tough defense. I think they're going to really run the ball. And the fact that game is in Athens, that game made me lean Georgia. The LSU game was tough. I literally, it's funny because I normally send Steven my picks. I actually had them 11-1 as well. I went back, I looked, and I was actually trying to see other games that we had picked or other games, and that one we hadn't picked yet. And I went back and forth on that one. I ended up picking LSU only because I think we know more about their offense right now than we know about Alabama's. Ty Simpson may be legit, and he may be, like I said, exactly what Kalen DeBoer wants and needs at the quarterback position. I think we know much more about Nessmeyer and that LSU offense than we know about this Alabama offense right now. But again, that answer may change, 2 weeks into the season if it looks like this thing is really clicking and Alabama has this thing going. So that's really, again, because that game is in Bryant Denny. That's why I initially had it Alabama. But when I went back and looked, I think these are the type of games that LSU needs to start winning. I think 10-2 is still a record that, like you mentioned, probably has you miss the SEC championship, but probably get you a pretty good seed again, especially with good wins against Florida State out of the ACC, Wisconsin out of the Big Ten, South Carolina, Tennessee, Oklahoma, Auburn. Those are all going to be seen as quality wins. I think you're still a somewhere between 4 and 8 in terms of seeding at 10-2 with some good wins. So I don't think there's anything to really be upset about if this is how your season ends, or your regular season ends going into the playoffs. And like I said, I expect by that point in time, Alabama's going to be really ready to make some noise, because I think the talent's there. I like that receiving core. I haven't seen them pop, right? Jam Miller hasn't popped, but we know what the talent looks like, and it looks like the potential for him to pop is there. I think that defense is going to be good. So this is a team that could, I'm going to be honest with you, win it all. This may be a little, and this is going to be crazy to say about Alabama,
I
but
don't
I
think it's
don't think a
crazy.
lot of people are going to pick Alabama to be the national champion. I don't think you're going to see a lot of the sports pundits picking Alabama to be the national champion, and this may be a team that is in that championship game and could win it all.
Yeah, I think Alabama's going to make a deep playoff run this year. I think we saw Alabama teams of the past, a decade ago, or around that time period where they had less than ideal quarterback talent. Obviously, you had Hurts, who was
Yes.
dynamic. You had Tua, who was nice. Obviously, Jalen Milroe didn't, win a national championship, but he was still able to, win at a consistent level. I think Ty Simpson, although he's not dynamic like some of those other quarterbacks that they've won the national championship with, like I said before, this offensive line is loaded. If they could just play behind the offensive line, I don't think you have to do anything super crazy to win games. When you have a really good home field advantage and you have a good offensive line, you can kind of just make the routine plays. And I think that's what they're going to be able to do. The defense is going to be elite. So I think they're going to make a really deep run in the playoffs. I don't know if I have them winning the national championship, but I do have them making a deep run this season. And I think Kalen DeBoer has a successful season heading into his second season as head coach. But as always, if you guys are new to the channel, make sure you guys like, comment down below your take about Alabama, subscribe to Join the Nation, and we'll see you guys tomorrow during the Georgia preview. Peace out.
Peace.